Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. Good morning, everyone. Happy May 4th. This is, does anybody know what May 4th is? Oh, everybody knows, Star Wars Day. So may the Force be with you. So, today I'm going to talk on the subject of what's so funny about peace, love, and small compassion. And some of you might recognize the title of my talk as a riff on the song What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding that was made famous by Elvis Costello in 1979. So some of you who are like my age will remember there was a singer named Elvis Costello who was really big back about the time I was in high school and college. He's still performing. It's not the same as Elvis Presley, just in case you don't know. So this is the song. The song starts, as I walk through this wicked world, searching for light in the darkness of insanity, I ask myself, is all hope lost? Is there only pain and hatred and misery? And each time I feel like this inside, there's one thing I want to know. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Now, you're lucky I chose not to sing it to you, and I did not put the video clip in because I didn't want OCBC to be dinged by YouTube for copyright violation, but you can look it up on YouTube. It's a great song, and especially the way that Elvis Costello performs it. So I think Elvis Costello, when he sings this, is asking why, with all the pain and misery that exists in the world, people don't take peace, love, and understanding more seriously. I see the song as a plea for compassion in a world full of suffering. That's why I'm recasting it today as What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Small Compassion? In our everyday conversation, we often use the word compassion as if it means the same as kind or caring or nice. But what does compassion really mean? Maybe you see a child who's crying out of frustration because they lost their favorite toy. You feel sorry for the child and you want to comfort her. Is that compassion? If you see news stories showing the suffering of people, this is an example. How do we feel? Aw. If you see news stories showing the suffering of people in a war zone and you feel so concerned and upset that you donate to a charity that provides food and medical aid in that area, is that compassion? Or your good friend's family member passes away and you see their deep sorrow and sense of loss. Their sadness and pain touches you so much that you hurt too, and you want to comfort them and cry with them. Is that compassion? These are all expressions of caring we might make when we see other people suffering, but they're not exactly the same as each other, and we might have different names for them. For example, what we feel for the crying child might be more like pity. You feel sad for the child in distress, but you also might be looking down at them a little bit, maybe judging them a little bit because you're older, you know better, you think the reason for their sadness is minor, and you figure they're going to get over it soon. In contrast, the feeling we might have when we see video or photos of people suffering in a humanitarian crisis, like a war or a natural disaster, an earthquake, a flood, that might be what we call sympathy. You feel deep and sincere concern for someone who's suffering, you feel something's not right, and you want to do something to help them. And that feeling of intense identification with the pain of our friend who lost a beloved family member might be called empathy, because you are actively sharing in and identifying with the emotional experience of the other person. You feel their pain in a very personal way. Regardless of these maybe subtle or small distinctions between pity, sympathy, and empathy, I think it's fair to say that all of them express feelings that we could kind of lump under the category of compassion. In Shin Buddhism, however, the word compassion has a meaning that is both broader and deeper than that. Shinran Shonin, the founder of our tradition, thought and wrote deeply about the meaning and the importance of compassion. In fact, it was basic to his ideas about Buddhism. Shinran spent many years as a monk, intensely studying and practicing Buddhism since the time he was 9 years old. Despite all his efforts, he was unable to reach the spiritual enlightenment he was looking for. In despair, at age 29, he left the monastery on Mount Hiei and traveled to Kyoto. There, he began a 100-day retreat alone at Rokkakudo Temple, where a statue of the Bodhisattva Kannon is enshrined. It might have looked something like this. This is Kannon. And in Buddhism, Kannon is the symbol of compassion. On the 95th day of his 100-day retreat, Shinran Shonin had a dream in which Kannon appeared to him, and that convinced him to seek out Honen Shonin to study the Nembutsu teachings. In his writings, Shinran Shonin says there are two kinds of compassion. The first is what he calls small compassion. Small compassion includes feelings of pity, sympathy, and empathy that we direct toward other beings, like people or animals. The problem is we do it in a dualistic way, meaning there's me over here, and over there is the other person or being toward whom I direct my feelings. I am the subject, and the other person is the object. I see myself as separate and different from that other person. We can't help thinking this way because we're self-centered and imperfect human beings. That's part of being human. We feel that the world revolves around us. When we look at things, we don't see things clearly. Our vision is affected by our own emotions, values, prejudices, wishes, and past experiences. Shinran Shonin said, "In this life, no matter how much pity and sympathy we may feel for others, it is impossible to help another as we truly wish. Thus, our compassion is inconsistent and limited." What does that mean, inconsistent and limited? It means that even if we try, we aren't able to be truly compassionate. Although we're trying to do the right thing, our egos and our self-interest and our calculating minds get in the way. Even if I think my motives are pure, there's the temptation to do something to feel good about myself or to look good in the eyes of other people, or because I think I'm right, I know better than you, and I'm doing this for your own good. And we can't help acting this way because, as Shinran understood, we're imperfect, ignorant human beings driven by our feelings and desires, and we don't see everything clearly. That doesn't make us bad people, but it does mean our ability to do good for others, to exercise even that small compassion of pity or sympathy or empathy, is flawed and imperfect. And Shinran Shonin, as great as he was no different from us. And he was really famous for looking really honestly and searchingly at himself. And when he looked honestly at himself, he confessed that he himself was incapable of even that kind of small compassion that we talked about. He wrote, "I am such that I do not know right and wrong, and cannot distinguish false and true. I lack even small love and small compassion, and yet, for fame and profit, enjoy teaching others." And that's true of me too, right? I'm standing up here, I'm giving this Dharma talk, and I'm thinking, wow, I really want to share the Dharma with the Sangha members, and I really hope that I can share something of value. But part of me is probably thinking, wow, I'm really hoping people are going to say, "That was a good Dharma talk, Janice. You did a good job today." I kind of want the praise. I think my motives aren't completely pure. And that's true of all of us, and that was true of Shinran too. I know it's true of me. I mentioned earlier that Shinran says there are two kinds of compassion. He contrasts small compassion with what he calls great compassion, about which he wrote, "Only the saying of Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, manifests the complete and never-ending compassion which is true, real, and sincere." When Shinran Shonin talks about great compassion, he is referring to the boundless, limitless compassion that is directed to us from Amida Buddha. We learn about this kind of compassion from the story of Dharmakara in the larger Sutra of Immeasurable Life, one of our foundational texts in Pure Land Buddhism. The larger sutra tells the story of Dharmakara, a truth seeker who, after encountering a teacher, awakens the aspiration to become a Buddha. He vows to liberate all sentient beings and to create a Buddha land where his aspiration will be fulfilled. After learning from countless Buddhas over innumerable years, he realizes limitless wisdom and compassion and becomes Amida, the Buddha of immeasurable light and life. And Amida is enshrined here on our Onaijin. We are the beneficiaries of Dharmakara's vow. Because of his vow, great compassion is directed towards us. It comes to us from Amida Buddha. Our lives are supported by innumerable causes and conditions, and the Nembutsu, the calling voice of Amida Buddha, wakes us up to this truth. We are the recipients of this gift of compassion from Amida, although we've done nothing to deserve it, and even though we're completely ignorant and foolish people. That's great compassion. Great compassion is at the heart of Mahayana Buddhism, of which Shin Buddhism that we practice here is a part. It is also the basis of the Bodhisattva ideal, where the focus is not on attaining individual spiritual liberation or nirvana for ourselves, but on helping liberate other beings. That's why we say that those who attain Buddhahood do not remain in the Pure Land. Instead, out of great compassion, they return to samsara, this world of suffering and delusion, this world that Elvis Costello was talking about, in order to save other sentient beings. Great compassion means that we live in a world of interdependence, of oneness. There's no difference between me and other beings. We're all inherently worthy in the eyes of Amida Buddha. We're embraced and accepted just as we are, with all our flaws. Now, the idea of great compassion sounds beautiful, but it can feel abstract or maybe hard to grasp. Amida is a symbol, not a person. How do I know that great compassion exists? How does Amida's vow relate to my life? Personally, I feel like I need examples from real life to hold on to as a kind of maybe gateway to show me what Amida's great compassion is and to remind me that it embraces us all. Although it's impossible for me as an individual, flawed human being to manifest great compassion on my own, it is possible for me to glimpse it and see it working in my life, I think. I'd like to share an experience that gave me that sort of glimpse. Now, some of you, like me, might be descendants of Japanese Americans who were among those unjustly incarcerated during World War II. Could have been your parents or your grandparents or great-grandparents, or maybe even you yourself, who was put in a camp during the war. And so it's been my personal quest to visit the sites of all 10 of the major wartime incarceration camps for Japanese Americans. Almost 1 year ago, my husband Jim and I visited our 10th and final camp, Amachi, which is located on the high plains of southeastern Colorado. That's Amida. This is the entrance sign at Amachi, which was designated a National Historic Site during our visit last year, May 2024. And this is a photo of Jim standing at the site of what was the barracks that housed the Amachi Buddhist temple. And here's a photo of the Amachi Buddhist church during a funeral in 1943, taken from the opposite side of where Jim was standing. So Jim is facing kind of the other way from where the front of the Amachi Buddhist Church would have been. So Jim's and my visits to the campsites have almost always been during pilgrimages to which camp survivors, descendants, and others come together to share, remember, and commemorate. Amachi happens to be about 40 miles from the site of the Sand Creek Massacre, where in November 1864, U.S. cavalry soldiers made an unprovoked attack on a peaceful encampment of Cheyenne and Arapaho Indians. The U.S. soldiers killed over 230 men, women, and children. During the last couple of years, some Sand Creek Massacre descendants have come to Amachi to attend the Japanese-American pilgrimage, and the following day, some Amachi pilgrims would go to Sand Creek for a commemoration there. The 2024 pilgrimage that Jim and I attended was also the first year of an Amachi and Sand Creek Youth Ambassador Program to bring together young people from both the Japanese American and Indian communities. It was a really moving experience to stand on the ground at Sand Creek, to walk along the hills and to look at the landscape where this terrible massacre took place. There are no structures left at that part of the site, so the land is pretty much as it was back then in 1864. And you could really feel the power of the place and the memory and the history that's embedded there. The most powerful moments for me came in hearing from Sand Creek descendants Gregory Spotted Bird Lame Bull and Otto Braided Hair as they shared the stories of the massacre that had been passed down through their families and tribal elders. They talked of the trauma suffered by their communities, not only from the massacre, but also through efforts to erase their culture, and of their work to make sure the history is remembered and passed down to future generations. So I think Greg Lamebull actually teaches at a tribal school that really strives to give young people pride and knowledge of their culture. This is the circle of listeners that we were a part of. And as I looked at that circle of people surrounding Greg Lamebull and Otto Braided Hair, everyone was listening so respectfully and with total concentration to their chanting and to their stories. Everyone was so quiet. There was just the rustle of the wind through the trees and the singing of the birds, kind of underlining the words of the speakers. And I think I felt the presence of great compassion. I could feel it in the gathering of all of us, people of many different backgrounds and ethnicities, brought together by countless causes and conditions in that place, at that time. Our histories, our experiences, and our backgrounds were different, but we could feel that our history and our faiths were joined. They were bound together. I became aware that I was in the presence of something much, much bigger than myself. What I was feeling was deeper than empathy or sympathy. I felt attunement. I felt connection. I felt oneness. There was no weighing or comparing of pain and trauma, no subject-object distinction, me here, you there. Despite the heavy history that brought us together in that place, I felt that all of us that were present there were supported by the universe. We were supported by great compassion. That was an individual experience that I had personally. I can't speak for anyone else who was present there that day, but for me, that experience at Sand Creek, a site where a terrible atrocity was perpetrated, a place of great trauma and pain, could also be a place of transcendence and grace that was being given to me. For me, it was a window, a glimpse into the great compassion that Shinran Shonin described. And this experience made great compassion something more tangible and real for me. So now we know the difference between what Shinran calls small compassion and great compassion. We also know that because we're human beings driven by our egos and ignorance and desires, the things we want, we're incapable ourselves of the kind of great compassion that Dhammakara had. So we might ask ourselves, is there any point in trying to do acts of small compassion, pity, sympathy, empathy, since, as Shinran points out, we lack the ability? Does it do any good at all? Well, I think the answer is yes. There is a value to practicing small compassion. When we use Shinran's term small compassion, we don't have to be dismissive of or to minimize the value of kindness on an individual human level. We're simply acknowledging our limitations as human beings and drawing a distinction between that of caring, that kind of caring, and the bigger, more encompassing kind of compassion that we receive from Amida Buddha, from a power beyond ourselves. In reflecting on kindness, I have been thinking about the term allyship that's often used in social justice discussions. For example, people may talk about being an ally to the LGBTQ plus community, for instance, or to Palestinians in Gaza, meaning they're not a member of that community, but they nevertheless support it out of a sense of shared humanity. I think true allyship is deeper than being just a supporter. It means acting out of a shared feeling that your fate is bound up with that of others, not just your own people. It's beyond pity or sympathy or empathy, and your feelings lead you to take action, whatever form that may take, in support and solidarity. You want others to not suffer, and you feel a resolve to work to prevent or to alleviate suffering. I think the essence of being an ally is captured in the term compassionate witness. When I attended the 2022 pilgrimage at the Heart Mountain incarceration camp in Wyoming, I was moved to learn about a local woman named LaDonna Zoll from the town of Powell, Wyoming, near the campsite. As an 11-year-old, LaDonna Zoll cried when she saw the final train of Japanese American incarcerees leave Heart Mountain in November 1945. Douglas Nelson, a member of the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation board, said about her, "She was filled with sadness at what, as a little girl, she instinctively knew had been hurtful and wrong, and that empathy, years later, led her to try, in so many different ways, to set things right." In the years after she last saw those last Japanese Americans leave Heart Mountain, LaDonna Zoll welcomed hundreds of former incarcerees on their visits to the campsite. She became the first curator of the artifacts that eventually turned into the collection of the Heart Mountain Interpretive Center. She advocated for the work of the foundation, donated to and fundraised for it. She started this at a time when racism and hostility toward Japanese Americans in the area was still very much present. She volunteered for Heart Mountain up until her death in 2021 at the age of 87. And the Heart Mountain Foundation gives an annual award now named in her honor, the LaDonna Zoll Compassionate Witness Award, to individuals whose families were not incarcerated, but who nonetheless have worked to expand awareness of that history. So one might say, based on Shinran's definition of small compassion, that the work that LaDonna Zoll did was not purely selfless. Were he to weigh in, he might say that she might have been acting out of guilt or out of a desire to feel good about herself or to get praise. But I do think that these actions that we might call small compassion nevertheless have meaning and importance and value. I don't think we're able to look inside the heart of another person and know exactly what makes them do what they do. But when I look at what LaDonna Zoll did, I see grace, I see transcendence, I see possibility. In her actions, I see manifested in human activity, in small compassion, the great compassion of a bodhisattva. So much of the time we're unconscious. And by the way, since this is Star Wars Day, I have to bring it back to Star Wars. I think that if you look at the original, the first 6 Star Wars episodes, which are the ones I grew up with, the first 6 movies. You know, I'm not saying the Force is the same as great compassion, but there's similarities to it. You know, it's something that comes from beyond ourselves. It's something that we are really incapable of understanding, but it's something that, you know, comes towards us and embraces us and helps us. And I think that a lot of the protagonists that we see in the Star Wars films, they are practicing small compassion. They're doing their best despite their flaws, you know, their ego, their own motivations, maybe their desire to become a great Jedi and to become powerful. They're still, in the end, because of the Force, they are just doing the best that they can, given who they are, given their flaws as human beings. You know, so I kind of draw that lesson of great compassion and small compassion from the Star Wars films as well. So much of the time we're unconscious of the great compassion that surrounds and illuminates us. We're just living our lives, right? But it's always there. As Shinran Shonin wrote, "My eyes being hindered by blind passions, I cannot perceive the light that grasps me, yet the great compassion, without tiring, illumines me always." And fortunately, sometimes we have these moments when our awareness of the great compassion breaks through, like the light breaking through the clouds of our delusion, and we can see it and we can feel it. How do we show our gratitude? We say thank you. How do we say thank you? We say Namo Amida Butsu. According to Shinran Shonin, that is enough. But I think we can actualize Namo Amida Butsu in our actions, in what we do in our daily life. We recognize that our own liberation is bound up in the liberation of others. Out of Amida's compassion, we've been given this great gift. And so out of gratitude and a deep sense of humility and indebtedness for the great compassion I'm constantly receiving, I will try to do my best to be worthy of it, however inadequate I am and my abilities are. That sense of indebtedness we feel is beautifully expressed in this verse written by Shinran Shonin, the Ondoku-san, and we're going to sing this in a few moments. Such is the benevolence of the Tathagata's great compassion that I must strive to repay it even if my body turns to dust. Such is the benevolence of the masters and true teachers that I will thank them till my bones have crumbled. So if you ask me what the point of small compassion is, I would say this: even though I'm incapable of great compassion myself and have done nothing to deserve it, I can express my gratitude for the great compassion I receive by doing my best to minimize the suffering I cause and to alleviate the suffering I see. My actions may be small compassion, but as a human being, it's the best that I'm capable of. I would do that not because I gain any benefit from it, but out of gratitude and a sense of indebtedness for all that I have received, for all the causes and conditions that support me in every moment of my life, in a myriad of ways, all sorts of ways, through the great compassion of Amida Buddha. More than ever, we could use more peace, love, and understanding in our world. Or, as Elvis Costello did not say, what's so funny about peace, love, and small compassion? Please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. Thank you very much.